Hello, Forever Family. My name's Shan. I'm the Recovery Pastor, and we are in a series of videos that are titled The 7 Stages of Loving Someone in Addiction. This is part 3. This one is labeled Enabling and Rage. So I came real close to trying to break this up into 2 separate sections, but really they went hand in hand so well. I thought this needs to stay together. So a little recap. Had a message, someone loving someone else in addiction. They said, hey, we need to talk about the loved ones. It's not talked about enough. So posted on Facebook, got your response, and I took your response and divided them up into what I thought were the 7 stages of loving someone in addiction. It's not clinical science. It is strictly your responses. And thank you for all the responses of the previous videos that you've already sent in. I'm absolutely overwhelmed. And thank you also for your other topic suggestions. I'm researching those, going to get those took care of. So thank you for that too. So let's just recap. So we talked about stage 1, which is shell shock. Then we talked about stage 2, which is clinging to hope. This is stage 3. It's called enabling and rage. So basically this is sorting through the valleys. Okay, so in this stage we come to accept that our loved one is in active addiction. We want to cling to hope, but we're beginning to feel more and more hopeless. We have more than likely become codependent. We talked about that in the previous video. And so now we are consumed with rage as we sort through the valleys of all these lows, but we've also become enablers of the active addiction. So what is an enabler? This is a person or thing that makes something happen. Okay, so a different definition is this is a person who encourages or enables negative or destructive behavior in another. Being an enabler to an addict, usually it helps speed up the process that the addiction does as it destroys the body, the mind, the soul, the spirit, because the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Let's just be real. This is a tool of the enemy. I'm a firm believer in that. Even though some say they're trying to help, really the only thing that enabler does is help someone in active addiction get to the grave faster. And I really hate to say it that way, but it is. There just comes a point where you have to say it like it is and explain what you mean, because I don't mean to say anything that's harsh or going to bring more harm, but there comes a point in recovery where people need to talk to each other with truth and with love. If we stop if we stop talking with all these fancy, pretty colorful words that can be misunderstood, and we start just basically saying this is what it is, recovery happens a lot easier, faster, productive. It's just better. So what does it mean to be an enabler? So when you give your loved one money knowing that they're going to go straight to feed their addiction instead of getting the basic survival needs, you still give them the money knowing this, you're enabling their addiction. You're helping them in addiction because you're helping them get their drug, or maybe it's somebody that's gambling. You're giving them money knowing they've gambled all their money away, but hey, $20, they go missing for a couple days because they've ran to the casino, and that $20 was put in a slot machine, and now they don't have gas money to get back home. So they're calling you, hey, I need gas money. Well, what happened to the $20? Well, funny thing, and I can't tell you how many times I've received a call at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, and the first thing I say is, what happened? Their response always starts with, well, what happened was, and they have this big, pretty exclamation, but I'm like, but you knew not to do that. the addiction is still in control. It is still in the driver's seat. So we have to be very careful that we don't give them access to more harm. So another visual is when your loved one vanishes and then you make excuses for them. You know they're using. You know they're somewhere they're not supposed to be. You may even know exactly which house they're hibernating in while they are in addiction, but you tell other loved ones or their children or their parents, oh, they're working out of town this week. Yeah, they'll be back. Just give them a couple days. But in your mind, you know they're feeding their addiction. Making excuses is enabling also. Being an enabler does not mean that you condone the behavior, but you're not drawing a line in the sand saying, I'm not going to support it anymore either. To an enabler, they believe that if they do not help or support the addiction, the outcome could be so much worse. I've had someone tell me, you don't understand. I have to keep putting money in her bank account because I've got to make sure she has the means to get back and forth to work. Come to find out, this person in active addiction had actually lost their job almost a month prior and did not tell their loved one. So the loved one really believed they were giving this person gas money. The person was going to the gas station, but what they were buying was not gas. It was not to get them from home to work. It was their addiction. So let's talk about if someone in active addiction has a spending addiction. Parent is constantly putting money in the account, not for what the loved one may need in the future, but they're putting money in the account because the account is overdrawn and getting hit with NSF fees. If a parent stops putting that money in, stops enabling the spending habits, then in the back of their mind, they know the loved one is going to rack up all these NSF fees. There's going to be embarrassment when the card declines. They could possibly end up stealing to feed this addiction. And this might sound absolutely stupid as an example, but fearing the embarrassment of a card declined, just the embarrassment, it all goes back to what I talked about in a previous video of our family wasn't raised like that. We're good people. We take care of what we're supposed to be taking care of. So that person's card does not need to be declined if they're in a store because it'll look bad on our whole family. You got to face the addiction head on. You got to understand that the person is in active addiction. They are not the addiction. Everybody has issues. Everybody has hurt. Everybody has something they are either in recovery for or they need recovery for. There's no one walking this earth that has not gone through something. And if you're sitting there saying that, I've never done that, I will never do that, maybe you need to look a little deeper and be truthful with yourself. Because I'm sure there's something in your past that you're probably very ashamed of and would never want anyone to know about. So before you point that finger and say, I've never done, make sure you're prepared for someone to comb through your past to see if there's anything embarrassing to you. We get so caught up in pointing out other people's addictions and their sin and what's wrong with them. But don't you dare step into my life and look at my past. We can't be like that. We've got to look at the addiction. We've got to look at the loved one. They are two separate things, but they are tied together at the moment. So let's talk about this. Let's go back to the card being declined and the person has a spending problem. If the parent is constantly giving the loved one money, knowing that they are feeding their addiction, but they fear what the loved one might do if they don't give them the money. You know what I'm saying? So they give them the money knowing knowing they're feeding their addiction. But in the back of their mind, they're also saying, but if I don't give them the money, what are they going to do to get the money? Would they steal and get caught? Would they sell themselves and risk disease and death? If I don't give them the money, then I could end up being the verbal punching bag for the one in active addiction. This is probably the hardest response that I received when I posed the question about being the loved one of someone in active addiction. I had so many people say, if I don't do this, I get verbally assaulted. I get emotionally just drained. I've even had someone say they were physically attacked by their loved one to the point that they feared dying at the hands of their loved one. That's a scary reality, but it is reality for some people. That's why I say if you are a loved one of someone in active addiction, you also are entitled to recovery. You also need to be talking to someone about what's going on so they can help you through this so that you don't become that punching bag physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually for the one that is in active addiction. When one of the parents is an enabler, okay, and this is where this stage, I thought about breaking it down into two stages, but it really went hand in hand, the enabling and the rage. When one parent is the enabler, but you have the other parent on the other side that is wanting to set boundaries through tough love, then this is where the family itself gets attacked. Because the actions of the one in addiction is in the middle of this, but now the family is divided. We need to help them. No, we need to let them face their own consequences. And it goes back and forth. And this has caused divorces. This has caused families to split and never talk to each other again. This is pretty serious. Sometimes people will, they're ready to cut off their loved ones financially. Their loved one can no longer live in their house. They try to set up a safe distance between themselves and the addiction. They've even said, you can come to my house, but you can't go outside of the room we're in. Like they try to contain them in that one room because they're so fearful of what the loved one in addiction is going to do, steal, go through. They don't know. So unfortunately, the enabling and the rage, or the enabling and the tough love, it puts the loved ones in this huge tug of war, and it literally breaks apart the family dynamic. So the enabling parent sees themselves as a helper, a facilitator, a coordinator, a care provider, an assistant, a supporter, a mediator, sometimes the driving force between anything that will help, a manager of their life, a director, a controller. They see themselves playing all these different roles of trying to keep the life above water for the person that's in active addiction, because they see this person slowly sinking. So basically, the enabler has taken all the responsibilities away from the loved one that is battling the addiction because they don't think the loved one can handle life anymore. So now the loved one in addiction feels worthless. There's no sense of accomplishment on any level. They feel even more like a failure. They're angry. They have resentment. This is where they start attacking the loved one. And they unleash all of their emotions physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And yes, spiritual attack is a real thing. Spiritual abuse is a real thing, and we're going to talk about that later. The loved one addiction will even say, well, if you accuse me of it, I might as well go ahead and do it, knowing the whole time they're already in active addiction. But they will deny it to the bitter end, but use the excuse of, well, you keep accusing me of it, so I might as well go ahead and use. I might as well go ahead and drink. I might as well go ahead and spend. I might as well go ahead and gamble. But the whole time, it's what they've been doing the whole time. Some will use their addiction to threaten their enablers. They say, if you don't do this, I'll just kill myself. If you don't do this, I'll just get in the car and start driving until I run out of gas. If you don't do this, it becomes this huge tug of war emotionally. And the loved one in addiction is in control. The addiction, again, is in the driver's seat. The other parent, on the other hand, because we're using an example of parents being the loved ones of the one in addiction. So if one parent is being the enabler and is getting threatened, and it's the verbal punching bag, the mental punching bag, the physical punching bag, the other parent grows more and more cold toward the addiction, to the point that they'll never speak to their loved one again, to the point they will separate themselves from the enabler because they're not going to be drugged down this path of just misery and silence. So you have three sides of this battle. You have the loved one in addiction. You have the enabler hoping to keep their loved one alive. You have the tough love administrator they're just not going to play the addiction game. They're just not. They're not going to listen to the lies. They're not going to believe anything you say. Each parent truly feels like they're doing the right thing. But in the long run, rage is the one that's calling the battle shots. It's the one throwing the fiery arrows. Rage has a different perspective depending on which person you're talking to. Remember that in general. Perspective depends 90% on where you're standing in the situation. No one is ever on the same page unless you are literally standing side by side, watching everything with the exact same past experiences and the exact same emotions and the exact same outlook. We're never on the exact same page because of different perspectives. The bottom line is, the only thing that this dynamic is achieving is creating more wounds and greater division. Everyone, they want the loved one in addiction to get help. They want them to enter a treatment facility, enter a rehab, enter a program. Just, they want their loved one out of addiction so desperate that sometimes they will do anything in order to achieve that. But until the loved one makes the decision, until they are sick and tired of being sick and tired, they're not going to change. And until then, the only thing that they're achieving is what we say, hurting people hurt people. Whether you're the enabler, tough love, the loved one in addiction, there's a wound. And it's growing more and more and more. So let's talk about some of the feedback and the responses that you gave that fit this stage, and why this stage is gosh, we could go on and on talking probably for hours about this stage alone. All the different scenarios and the different coulda, shoulda, wouldas. But this is some of the things, the responses that I received from you. The first one is, how do I love unconditionally and not enable? Can those go hand in hand? The next one was, my loved one blames me for making them turn to drugs, instead of facing their own problems. Now, what this person shared with me is they're a fix-it person. So every time something would happen, they would tell the loved one, well, this is what we need to do to fix it. Then they would just step in and fix it. So now the loved one in addiction blames everything, including their drug addiction, on this fix-it person. Another one is, I've never gone through this before. How do I set boundaries? Those that are caregivers at heart, setting boundaries is sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever have to do. And it's very emotional, but it is necessary. The next one is, I feel like I'm at a dead-end street because I have to purchase things instead of giving them money. If I just give them money and I don't remove the tags, they'll exchange it at the store and get the money and continue doing whatever it is they want. Another one is, I became tired of the threats. So when my loved one in addiction would call and threaten their own life, if I didn't do whatever it was they wanted, I would simply start calling the police and asking them to do a welfare check. Usually this resulted in my loved one getting arrested, going to jail, and I knew the very next time my phone rang, I would be cussed for having the police sent to their house. Another one was, how could my loved one not see that they are self-destructing? The next one is, I feel so helpless that I cannot even get out of bed sometimes, so I don't know how I'm supposed to do anything else. Another one is, my trust is so shattered that I'm scared to rebuild or have any relationships. And the last one, I fear the manipulation. I fear the relapse. I fear the guilt trips. I fear the unnecessary of everything. I don't want to deal with anything anymore. I fear the uncertainty of not knowing where my loved one is. I fear getting that phone call when the body of my loved one is found somewhere and they've passed away. Wow, this video could go on and on and on and on and on. I want to encourage you again, if you are in active addiction, or if you're a loved one of someone in active addiction, please reach out for help. You do not have to go through this alone. There are resources. There are people that would love to walk alongside of you and help you through this process of valleys, because you may not feel like there's ever going to be a mountaintop again. I have resources. I would love to hook you up with someone to talk to, and that would help you through this. My contact information, my email will be in the description. You're welcome to inbox me. I welcome your comments and your replies to these videos. If you know someone that's dealing with something, please share these videos. They may be the open door to a conversation that you don't know how to start yet. If you haven't watched it yet, go back and watch the intro video. All of these are called the 7 stages of loving someone in addiction. Go back and watch the intro, watch stage 1, watch stage 2. This is stage 3. It's called enabling and rage. So until next time, much agape, everybody.